Have you ever wondered what really stalks the highways after midnight, when the rest of the world is asleep and only the truckers are still moving? Out there, past the last gas station light, the road becomes something else. Headlights carve through empty fog, CB radios crackle with half-whispered warnings, and mile markers slip by like gravestones. Tonight, you're not just hearing a trucker horror story. You're stepping into it. These accounts come from men and women who swear they'll never drive certain stretches of road again. Some made it home with a story, some didn't. Stay with this video until the end, if you think you can. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And subscribe to our channel for more horror stories. My name is Damon Klein, and I've been driving a rig for almost 20 years. In all that time, I've seen just about everything the American highway can throw at a person: blizzards in Wyoming, dust storms in New Mexico, pileups on I-95. But nothing has stayed with me the way that night on Interstate 40 did, cutting across the Texas Panhandle into western Oklahoma when a stranger's voice on the CB almost got me killed. It was a little after midnight in late October, and I was hauling refrigerated produce from El Paso to Memphis. The route was familiar. I'd run it maybe 100 times. 1 to 40 straightens out in this section, nothing but endless asphalt and the occasional truck stop, mile after mile of darkness pressing down from above. My eyes were starting to feel heavy, so I had the radio on, listening to the usual chatter, guys swapping fuel prices, warnings about way stations, the ambient hum of the trucking community keeping itself company through the long nights. That's when I heard her. "Is anyone out there? Please, I need help. I'm stranded." The voice was female, panicked, young, maybe mid-20s. She was broadcasting on Channel 19, the truckers' channel, which was odd. Most people don't know to use it unless they're in the industry, or they've stumbled onto it by accident. "Where are you, ma'am?" I keyed the mic. My handle back then was Longhorn. I'd been using it since the 90s, 1 to 40, west of Shamrock, Texas, mile marker 158. My car broke down about 20 minutes ago. It's just me and my daughter. She's sleeping in the back seat. Please, someone help us. I could hear the tremor in her voice, the genuine desperation, or what sounded like it. I was about 40 miles behind her position, maybe 45 minutes out. No other trucks responded to her call. That bothered me a little usually. When a woman's in distress on the highway, at least 2 or 3 drivers will jump on it. But that night, nothing but static. "I'm coming," I said. "Keep your hazards on. I'll be there as soon as I can." "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. "Thank you so much." I pushed the rig a little harder, watching my speed climb past the legal limit. The road was empty, the kind of empty that feels deliberate. The panhandle stretches on forever, flat, featureless, like driving through the bottom of a dark ocean. As I got closer, maybe 15 minutes out, I started thinking about what I'd do when I got there. Call the highway patrol? I had a CB in the cab, but no cell service that far out. I could make a call from my truck phone, a satellite job that cost a fortune per minute. It seemed safer to see what the situation actually was first, but something in my gut had already started to whisper. I'd picked up hitchhikers before, back when I was younger and less experienced. I'd also heard enough stories from other drivers, bad situations, close, calls, worse, to know that the highway can turn on you in a heartbeat. Still, a woman with a kid? I couldn't just leave them out there. "How's your daughter doing?" I asked, trying to keep the channel open, trying to keep her talking. There was a pause. Longer than there should have been. "She's fine, just sleeping." "Longhorn, how far away are you?" "About 10 minutes. Okay, that's good." And then, just for a second, I heard something in the background. A sound like a door closing, or maybe someone laughing. It was quick, almost buried in the static, but it was there. My hands tightened on the wheel. "Everything all right over there?" I asked. "Yes, everything's fine. Just hurry, please." But her voice had changed. It was subtly different, less panicked, more controlled, like someone who just remembered their lines. I kept driving. Mile marker 160, 159, 158 coming up. And as I saw the exit sign, I made a decision that probably saved my life. I didn't pull off at mile marker 158. Instead, I eased off the accelerator and let the rig coast, scanning the darkness ahead. There, about a quarter mile past the marker, I saw it. A dark sedan, pulled off on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking slow and steady. Professional, almost too perfect. I keyed the mic one more time. I can see your car. I'm slowing down now. What happened next was the thing that still makes my skin crawl. The voice that came back wasn't hers. It was male, low, and it said only 3 words. Keep driving, trucker. And then I saw them. 2 figures, maybe 3, moving fast from the tree line on the far side of the car. The dark shapes of men, one of them carrying something that caught the moonlight. It took me maybe half a second to understand. I floored it. The rig's engine roared, and I felt the weight of the trailer behind me lurch forward. I didn't look back. I just kept my foot down, watching my mirror as the sedan and those shapes receded into the darkness. My heart was hammering so hard I thought my chest might split open. After about 2 miles, I eased off the gas and keyed the radio. "All drivers on channel 19, I said, my voice shaking. "There's a setup at mile marker 158 on I-40, westbound, just past Shamrock. Do not stop. Do not engage. Contact the state police immediately." And then I hung up and didn't touch that radio again for the rest of the night. I drove for another hour straight, my hands still shaking on the wheel, before I found a truck stop. It was a small place called Red Mesa, just off the highway near the Oklahoma border. The fluorescent lights inside felt like a refuge, and I sat in the diner booth with a cup of coffee I didn't touch, trying to decide what to do. The smart thing was to call the police. But I was scared, not of the cops, but of what had just happened. I'd almost driven into an ambush. That realization kept cycling through my head like a broken record. A woman's voice, a child. All of it fabricated, all of it designed to get me to stop at 247, and I found a payphone outside the truck stop bathroom and dialed the Texas State Police non-emergency line. The officer who took my call was named Sergeant Rivera. He sounded tired, like he'd heard 100 variations of the same story. But when I told him about the CB call, the sedan, the figures moving in the trees, something shifted in his tone. He got serious. He asked for details, my name, my trucking company, the exact location, the timestamps. He said he'd send a unit to investigate and that I should file a formal report. "Have there been other incidents?" I asked. There was a pause, long enough that I knew the answer before he gave it. "Mr. Klein, I'm going to be honest with you. That stretch of I-40 has been a concern for us. We've had reports," he was choosing his words carefully, "of similar setups. We don't have confirmation of organized activity, but we have suspicions." "What kind of suspicions?" "Robbery, primarily, possibly worse. But without solid evidence, our hands are tied." I filed the report that night. 2 state troopers showed up at the truck stop around 4 a.m., took my statement, and confirmed that they'd sent a unit to mile marker 158. They found the sedan, abandoned, no fingerprints worth mentioning, no ID, just an older Chevy with stolen plates. The car had been reported missing from Albuquerque 2 days prior. There was no sign of the people who'd been there, but here's the thing that stuck with me. One of the officers mentioned that they'd found something else at the scene. Rope, duct tape, a crowbar. In the trunk, they found a logbook with handwritten notes, dates, times, vehicle descriptions, driver names pulled from CB chatter. They were hunting truckers, and they'd been doing it for a while. Over the next few days, I did what any driver would do. I called around. I talked to guys at the truck stops, guys on the radio, guys I knew from the road. And the stories came pouring in. A driver named Marcus, who'd pulled off at a rest area and had someone try to force him back into the cab. Another guy, Billy, who'd picked up a hitchhiker outside Lubbock and realized halfway through the drive that the guy had a knife. Close calls, near misses, things that hadn't made the news. One driver, a veteran guy named Victor, who'd been on the road longer than I'd been alive, told me something I've never forgotten. "They're testing the waters," he said. "Some of these operations, they start small. They learn what works, what doesn't. The ones who get caught, they're just the small players. There's always someone higher up, organizing it. I asked if he'd reported it to the cops. "Course I did," he said. "But unless something goes really wrong, unless someone ends up dead, it doesn't get the attention it deserves. And by then, it's too late for whoever it was." About 2 weeks later, Sergeant Rivera called me back. He said they'd made an arrest. A man named Derek Voss, 28, with a history of armed robbery. They'd linked him to the setup at mile marker 158. He wasn't talking much, but his phone records showed connections to at least 3 other known criminals in the area. They were building a case. "What about the woman's voice?" I asked. "On the CB, we think it was a recording," Rivera said, "or one of the guys imitating a woman. They were sophisticated about it, professional. They weren't amateurs." I asked the question that had been eating at me for 2 weeks. How many people have they actually gotten to stop? He didn't answer for a long time. "We don't know for sure," he finally said. "But we're looking into 2 missing persons cases from the past 18 months. Both drivers on that stretch of I-40. Both disappeared. No bodies, no traces. Just gone." The line went quiet except for the hum of the connection. One of them, Rivera continued, was a woman. Her name was Sarah Chen. She was 34, married with 2 kids. She was running a load to Tulsa when she went off the grid. Her truck was found abandoned at a rest stop near mile marker 152. Mile marker 152, 6 miles away from where I'd almost stopped. I don't sleep well anymore when I'm in that part of the country. After that phone call with Sergeant Rivera, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go, not because I'm some kind of hero. I'm not. But because I'd gotten lucky and Sarah Chen hadn't. Whoever was organizing these ambushes was still out there, still hunting. And every driver on that stretch of I-40 deserved to know. I started keeping detailed notes. Every time I ran that route, I'd log the mile markers, note any unusual activity, watch for patterns. I joined online trucker forums and started posting warnings, anonymously at first. I talked to other drivers at truck stops, shared what I knew. Word spreads fast in the trucking community. Within a month, there was a Facebook group dedicated to highway safety in that region, and it had over 3,000 members. The CB chatter changed too. Drivers started calling out suspicious setups, reporting broken down cars. That looked too staged, warning each other about unmarked rest stops. It became this organic network of protection, something the authorities couldn't have orchestrated, even if they'd wanted to. But the criminals adapted. 3 weeks after Derek Voss's arrest, there was another incident. A driver named Thomas Hendricks, good guy, married, ran the same routes. I did. Picked up a hitchhiker near mile marker 140. The hitchhiker seemed normal at first. Mid-20s, traveling to Oklahoma City, polite enough. But after about 20 minutes, the guy's demeanor changed. He pulled a gun, told Thomas to drive to a remote area off the highway. Thomas didn't hesitate. He swerved the rig hard, sent the trailer jackknifing. The hitchhiker flew forward, the gun went off, and a round punched through the windshield. Thomas managed to wrestle control of the cab, got the rig stopped, and the guy bolted into the scrubland. He ran. Thomas called 911, and the state police picked up the suspect 2 miles away. That one made the news. Local outlets ran the story. Trucker thwarts armed robbery. Thomas became something of a local celebrity for a few weeks. But what the news didn't report was what the arrested man told the cops, that he was part of a larger operation, that there were other people involved, and that the ambushes weren't just about robbery. According to the police report I later obtained through a FOIA request, the suspect, a man named Curtis Webb, said the operation was also involved in human trafficking. The distressed woman calls weren't always fabrications. Sometimes they were real women, victims being transported and then used as bait to lure drivers into situations where they could be robbed, their vehicles stolen, their cargo hijacked. The whole thing made my blood run cold. I started thinking about that voice on the CB that night. Was she real? Was there actually a child in that car? Or was it all theater, all performance designed to exploit my decency? I'll never know for sure. What I do know is that about 6 months after my encounter, the operation was effectively dismantled. Derek Voss took a plea deal and testified against his associates. Curtis Webb was convicted and sentenced to 12 years. 3 other men were arrested in connection with the ring. The authorities never found Sarah Chen or the other missing driver, but they recovered a lot of stolen cargo and disrupted a pipeline that had been moving people illegally across state lines. Sergeant Rivera called me one more time, about 8 months after that first report. "I wanted you to know," he said, "that we traced some of the operation's activity back further than we initially thought. We found evidence of at least 9 attempted ambushes over a 2-year period. You were one of the lucky ones." "And the others?" I asked. "We're still investigating, but based on the logbook and their records, we believe at least 3 people were successfully taken, robbed, their vehicles stolen. 2 of them managed to escape and contact authorities later, but one," he paused, "we don't know what happened to him. I've driven that stretch of I-40 many times since then. The highway looks the same mile markers, same endless horizon, but it feels different now. Every breakdown I see on the side of the road makes me tense up. Every voice on the CB asking for help makes me calculate the odds, the angles, the risks. I'm not cynical enough to assume everyone asking for help is running a scam, but I'm experienced enough now to know that the highway isn't as safe as we like to pretend it is. The ambushes are still out there, just in different forms. The threat doesn't go away just because one operation gets shut down. It just evolves. And so do we, those of us who drive these roads. We adapt. We warn each other. We stay vigilant because the highway, at its heart, is still a wild place. And the night is still very, very dark. You'd think that after something like that, a man might hang up his keys for good. Truth is, trucking is the only life I've ever really known. The road gets into your blood, into your bones. It changes the way you see the world. So no, I didn't quit. I just learned to live with the shadows that ride alongside me now. About a year after the ambush at mile marker 158, I found myself back on I-40, running a late load eastbound. Different company, different truck, same old highway. The seasons had turned. Over a few times, and on the surface, life had gone back to normal. The case had disappeared from the news cycle. New tragedies had taken its place. That's how it always goes. But the road remembers, and so do the people who survive it. It was another October night. Funny how that month keeps coming back around. Cool and clear. A razor-thin moon hanging over the panhandle like a chipped fingernail. I was sipping bad coffee from a travel mug, listening to a true crime podcast through my phone. The kind of irony only a long-haul driver can appreciate. For hours nothing happened, just me, the hum of the engine and the white lines sliding under my headlights. I passed a few cars, a few fellow truckers. It was ordinary, almost boring. Then somewhere west of Shamrock, my CB crackled to life. "Is anyone out there? Please, I need help. I'm stranded." I went cold. Same pitch, same cadence, same quaver of panic. It was like hearing a voice from a nightmare you thought you'd outgrown. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. I-40, just past mile marker 158, the woman said. My car broke down. "It's just me and my daughter. Someone, please." I reached out and turned the volume down, but not all the way. I sat there listening, my heart pounding, hands locked on the wheel. I knew what this was supposed to be. I knew the pattern. But there was one problem. I had passed mile marker 158 20 minutes ago. I checked my dash clock, did the math in my head. Even if she'd just broken down, her signal shouldn't have sounded that clear, that strong, from that far back. Not unless she was bouncing off some freak atmospheric condition. Not unless she wasn't where she said she was. Or not unless I was hearing something else entirely. "Can anyone hear me?" she said again. "Please, my daughter's asleep. I'm so scared." For a moment, I considered keying the mic and saying something, anything. But what was I going to do? Comfort a recording? Engage with bait meant for someone else? Instead, I reached for my phone and called the state police. By then, I had the highway patrol numbers for half the country saved in my contacts. "This is driver Damon Klein," I said when the dispatcher picked up. "I'm on eastbound I-40, just crossed into Oklahoma. I'm hearing a distress call on channel 19 that matches a known ambush, pattern from last year, near mile marker 158. You might want to send a car to check it out." The dispatcher took my details, thanked me, said they'd look into it. Standard script. But before I hung up, she said something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. We actually had another call about something similar about an hour ago, she said. Different driver, same area. He said he heard the call, but when units got there, there was nothing. No car, no debris, nothing unusual. Then why did he call? I asked. Because he said he'd heard that exact same voice 6 months earlier, word for word. I drove the rest of that night with the CB turned off. Some things you don't need to hear more than once. A few weeks later, I stopped at a truck stop outside Amarillo and ran into Victor, the older driver who'd warned me about organized operations testing the waters. We grabbed a late dinner together, 2 plates of greasy eggs and hash browns under buzzing fluorescent lights. I told him about the call, about mile marker 158, about the dispatcher saying another driver had heard the same words months apart. Victor didn't laugh. He didn't roll his eyes. He just listened, chewing slowly, looking at something far away that wasn't in that diner. Radio's a funny thing, he said at last. You drive long enough, you'll hear all kinds of ghosts talking to you over the airwaves. Old signals bouncing around the atmosphere. Half the time it's science. The other half, well... He shrugged. The highway keeps its own kind of records. You think it was just some stray transmission? I asked. Maybe, he said. Or maybe some things just don't know how to die right. We sat in silence for a while after that. On my way back to the lot that night, I passed by a bulletin board near the showers. Drivers leave all sorts of things pinned up there. Business cards, job offers, prayer requests, missing persons flyers. One in particular caught my attention. It was an old, sun-faded flyer, barely clinging to the cork with one last thumbtack. The paper was curled at the edges, the ink beginning to blur. A woman's face looked out from the center of it. Asian, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, tired eyes that still somehow seemed hopeful. Above the photo, in bold black letters, were 3 words. Missing, Sarah Chen. Someone had tried to peel the flyer off and thought better of it, leaving the bottom half torn. The phone numbers were smudged, but still visible. Some part of me wanted to dial them, to hear what kind of voicemail waited on the other end. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there for a long time, staring at her face, thinking about mile marker 152. Thinking about logbooks and duct tape, and the precise moment a person's life slips into someone else's hands. The company eventually reassigned me. My routes changed. These days, I don't run through the panhandle as often, but every now and then, dispatch will send me a job that cuts across I-40, and I'll find myself back on that ribbon of asphalt, counting down the mile markers. When I pass 158, I don't look toward the shoulder. I don't scan for cars or hazards or blinking flashers. I just keep my eyes on the road ahead, hands loose but ready on the wheel. And I never ever turn my CB to channel 19 in that stretch. You might be wondering why I'm telling you all this. Why dredge up an old story about an operation that's supposedly been shut down and men who are already behind bars? Because the voice still comes through every now and then, not just on that highway, not just in that state. Drivers talk. They share things in private messages, late-night calls, anonymous posts. A woman, panicked, saying she's alone with her child, a specific mile marker, a car that looks too perfect, and every time it matches the same pattern. Sometimes there's a car. Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes the cops find nothing at all. Maybe it's copycats. Maybe it's old recordings. Maybe it's just the legend of the road growing a life of its own. Or maybe the highway holds on to echoes of things that went wrong, of people who were never found, of choices that were made in the space of a heartbeat. All I know is this: if you're ever driving late at night on a long, empty stretch of interstate, especially out there in the panhandle, and you hear a woman's voice crackling through the radio, begging for help near mile marker 158, you better think long and hard before you pull over, because sometimes the monsters on the highway carry crowbars and duct tape, and sometimes, if you listen closely enough, the highway itself is still trying to warn you. My name is Damon Klein. I'm still out here, somewhere between the dotted lines and the darkness. And if you hear my voice on the radio, warning you not to stop for a car that looks too perfect on the side of an empty road, Story 2. My name is Eli Mercer, and I drive nights because I don't like looking my problems in the eye. It's easier when they're just shadows in the mirrors instead of faces I recognize. It was late summer when dispatch put me on the route that would change the way I look at every stranded car for the rest of my life. I was running westbound on Highway 287 through the Texas Panhandle, loaded with electronics headed for Denver. Third run that week. I knew the road, knew the timing, knew exactly when the boredom would start to chew at my brain. That night, the sky was moonless and heavy, the kind of darkness that swallows the horizon. The only light came from my headlights, carving 2 white tunnels through the black and the occasional distant flicker of another rig. Road signs slid past: Childress, Clarendon, Claude, Amarillo still a little way off. I kept the CB low, just enough for way station warnings and weather alerts. The chatter was thin, one guy whining about low-paying loads, another talking about a wreck outside Oklahoma City. Then I saw her. At first, she was just a shape in the high beams, a slim figure standing on the narrow shoulder, right on the rumble strip, one arm raised. As I got closer, details snapped into focus. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, long dark, hair plastered to her face by the wind, wearing a light jacket too thin for the night. No car, no hazards, just her and an overnight bag at her feet. Instinct screamed at me to keep going. Every safety memo I'd ever signed flashed in my head. Don't pick up hitchhikers. Don't stop on the shoulder at night. Don't become a statistic. But as I flew past, my lights hit her face. She wasn't putting on a show. No wild waving, no fake sobbing. She just looked empty, like someone who'd run out of options 3 hours ago and was now just standing alone with the consequences. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I eased off the throttle, checked my mirrors and hit the flashers. The rig growled as it slowed. I coasted to a stop about 300 yards ahead of her, the truck shuddering slightly as it settled. Sitting there on the shoulder, I felt it, that prickling between the shoulder blades that says, "You made a mistake." I watched her in the mirror. She didn't run, didn't wave in relief. She just started walking toward the truck in a steady, measured way, like this had all been rehearsed. "Bad idea, Eli," I muttered. But I'd already made it. I cracked the passenger door and leaned over. When she drew close, the headlights caught her face full on, pale, dark rings beneath her eyes, lips dry and cracked. She clutched the strap of her bag like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. "You all right?" I called down. She looked up, and for the first time, I saw something like life in her expression. "Please," she said, "I just need to get to the next town. Anywhere with lights." Her voice wasn't panicked. It was flat, controlled, like someone who'd burned through panic and come out the other side. "Where's your car?" I asked. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but long enough. "It died," she said, "a few miles back. I've been walking on 287 in the middle of nowhere. No flashlight, no phone, nothing but a thin jacket." My gut twisted, but leaving her there didn't feel like an option. Not after I'd stopped, not after I'd seen her face up close. "All right," I said. "Hop in, buckle up. I'll take you to Amarillo." She climbed into the cab slowly, like she was afraid the truck might evaporate if she moved too fast. Up close, she smelled like cold air, sweat, and the faint coppery tang of old blood. A small cut marked her left cheek, half hidden under her hair. I pulled back onto the highway, engine rumbling. "What's your name?" I asked. She stared straight ahead, hands locked on her bag. "Harper," she said. "My name is Harper." For the first 10 miles, Harper barely spoke. She sat rigid, eyes fixed on the road like it might betray her at any second. Up close, the damage was clearer. The cut on her cheek was fresh. A fading bruise traced her jawline. Her clothes were dusty, like she'd been through fields or on the ground. "You from around here?" I asked, casual. "No," she said. Silence stretched. "Oklahoma City. I was on my way to see someone." "Boyfriend?" I made it sound like small talk. She flinched, just a little. "Not anymore," she said. The CB crackled softly, some distant driver droning about fuel. I reached over and turned it further down. I wanted silence. I wanted to hear if anything in this truck changed. You got any ID? I asked, pretending it was an afterthought. The question escaped before I decided if I really wanted the answer. Her fingers tightened on the bag. I left my wallet in the car, she said. Everything's in there. Phone? Dead. Too neat. No car. No hazards. No flashlight. No ID. No phone. But a perfectly timed appearance on a lonely stretch of highway where a tired driver's conscience might override his caution. Look, I said, if you're in some kind of trouble. I'm getting out in Amarillo, she cut in, voice low but firm. You won't see me again after that. I just need a ride. Please. We drove in silence. Miles ticked by. Road signs flashed past. The hum of tires started to sound like whispering if I listened too hard. Then she started asking questions. Do you always drive alone? She asked. Most of the time, I said. Why? She shrugged. Just wondering. A minute later, do people know your route? Do they track you? Yeah, I said slowly. Dispatch watches GPS. Why? Again, that little shrug. Just curious. She sounded like someone checking boxes on a form. How valuable is your load? She asked next. Electronics, jewelry, anything like that? Bright, flashing red flag. Harper, I said carefully. You asking because you're scared of getting robbed or because you're thinking about something else? She finally turned and really looked at me. Her eyes were bloodshot but sharp. If I wanted to hurt you, she said quietly, I picked a stupid way to do it. No weapon, no backup, no car. Just me versus you and 40 tons of steel. That's not an answer, I said. She exhaled, annoyed. Do you always pick up people on the side of the road? She countered. Used to, I said. Learned better. What made you stop? A story, I said, about a driver who didn't make it to his next stop. She chewed the inside of her cheek. A green sign flashed by. Amarillo 46. Almost there. I let myself relax, just a little. That's when the CB, still barely audible, crackled to life. Eli, can you hear me? A voice whispered. I went cold. No one on the road uses your real name on the radio. They use handles. Dust Devil, Midnight Ruby, not Eli. I turned the knob up. Static. A hiss. Then, driver in the blue Kenworth heading west. You picked her up. You need to listen. My throat went dry. Who is this? I said, thumb on the transmit. You talking to me? Silence. Harper watched me, eyes suddenly sharp, like an animal catching a new scent. You okay? She asked. The CB crackled again. Pull into the next truck stop, Eli, the man's voice said. Park in the light. Don't go past exit 112. They're waiting for you past that. My pulse spiked. Who's they? I demanded. What are you talking about? The answer came back fast. The ones she ran from, the voice said, and the ones who sent her, Ridge. The next exit wasn't for another 12 miles. 12 miles of dark road, tense silence, and a stranger in my passenger seat who suddenly felt a lot heavier than 120 pounds. You know him? I asked Harper. No, she said. Too fast. You tell anyone you were out here? I pressed. Anyone who'd know you might flag down a truck? She shook her head, jaw tight. The CB hissed again. Eli, you still there? The man asked. You're coming up on Rattlesnake Ridge Truck Plaza. Big blue sign, bad coffee, flickering O in the word motel. Pull in there. Now. I knew the place. Old, half-forgotten truck stop a few miles short of the New Mexico line. Cheap fuel, greasy food, a parking lot full of shadows. Why should I trust you? I asked. Because if you keep going past exit 112, the voice said, you'll hit a fake construction zone. No cameras, no traffic. Just cones and a couple of guys in vests who aren't Dot. They'll wave you over, say there's debris, ask you to step out and sign something, and then you disappear. The hair on my arm stood up. How do you know that? I said. Because 3 months ago, the man replied. They tried it on me. The name on the CB display flickered for a second as his carrier spiked. Handle, Sundown. I'd heard that handle before. Stories in truck stop diners. A driver who ran night routes exclusively, who'd once talked a rookie through a whiteout in Wyoming, who had a reputation for showing up on the radio only when things were about to go sideways. "Harper," I said quietly, "tell me the truth. Who's waiting past exit 112? She stared down at her hands, knuckles white around the bag strap. "If I tell you," she said, voice barely audible, "you won't keep driving." "That's the idea." She swallowed. "They're not after you," she said. "They're after your load. Trucks are worth more than cars. They like rigs. Do they know you're with me?" I asked. She hesitated. "Yes," she whispered. "They saw me get in. They knew I'd wait for a truck. They told me what to say if someone stopped. They said if I helped, they'd let me go." "Let you go from what?" She pulled up her sleeve just enough for me to see the ring of bruises around her wrist. "Finger marks. They don't like to waste people," she said. "Sometimes they rob truckers. Sometimes they keep them. To drive, to move things, to move people." I felt nauseous. "You were bait," I said. She nodded. "I was supposed to keep you talking, keep you calm, make sure you didn't call anyone. And if you did what they wanted, maybe they'd only take the cargo." "And if I didn't?" She didn't answer. The sign for exit 112 appeared in the distance, a green rectangle hanging in the dark. "Rattlesnake Ridge Truck Plaza, 1 mile." "Eli," Sundown said on the CB, "you see the sign yet?" "Yeah," I said. "Take it," he said. "Park under the brightest lights you can find. Don't walk anywhere alone. Call state police from inside. Use a landline. Your cell might be watched." I looked at Harper. "You want out of this?" I asked her. "Really out? This is your one window." Tears welled in her eyes, sudden and raw. "I tried to run once," she said. "They found me in Amarillo, took my shoes, took my ID, said next time they'd take my sister instead. You tell me everything," I said, "and you walk into that truck stop with me. We call the cops. You ask for protective custody. You tell them about the construction setup, the fake crews, everything. You don't leave anything out." Her breathing hitched. "They'll kill me if they find me," she whispered. I flipped on my turn signal. "They'll kill you if you keep working for them," I said. "This way, at least somebody else knows your name." We took the exit. Rattlesnake Ridge Truck Plaza rose out of the dark like a relic, faded signs, buzzing fluorescent lights, a handful of trucks parked in scattered rows. The O in motel flickered between life and death, just like Sundown had said. I pulled into a space directly under a light pole. The sodium lamp buzzed overhead, spilling harsh yellow light over the hood. "Kill your engine," Sundown said, "and whatever you do, don't walk around the blind side of your trailer. If they followed you, they'll use the dark." I turned the key. The engine rumbled down into silence. For a moment, the world felt too quiet. "Ready?" I asked Harper. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and nodded. "Leave the bag," I said. "If there's anything in there they gave you, it can wait." We stepped down from the cab together and walked toward the glass doors of the truck stop. Two figures crossing a pool of light in the middle of a very big, very dark nowhere. Inside, Rattlesnake Ridge was all stained tiles, humming refrigerators, and the smell of burnt coffee. A bored cashier glanced up from his phone, barely registering us. I headed straight for the payphones along the back wall. They were dinosaurs, but that was exactly what I wanted. Harder to intercept, harder to track. "Who you calling?" Harper asked, hovering like she was afraid to get too far from me or too close. "State police," I said. "Texas and DPS. You're going to tell them everything." Her hands shook as she picked up the receiver. I fed in coins and dialed. When the dispatcher answered, I gave my name, location, truck description, and told her I had a potential witness and victim tied to an ongoing highway hijacking ring using a fake construction zone near exit 112. They took it seriously. Within 20 minutes, 2 patrol cars rolled into the lot, followed by an unmarked sedan. One of the officers, a woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense stance, ushered Harper into a booth, took off her jacket, offered her water. The other officer pulled me aside. "You sure you're not exaggerating this?" he asked. "We get a lot of nervous drivers out here." "You got a CB?" I countered. He frowned. "Of course. Leave it on tonight," I said. "And when your guys hit that fake construction site, listen to what comes over Channel 19. If Sundown says he saw something, you'd better believe him." They didn't know the stories like drivers did. They didn't know the legend of a handle that only ever showed up when things were about to go bad. But they didn't argue further. Harper talked for over an hour. I couldn't hear every word, but the pieces I caught were enough. Names, locations, a house outside Amarillo, where they kept people without papers, a chop crew that specialized in extracting GPS units in black boxes before ditching stolen rigs. They told me truckers were easy, she said at one point, voice cracking. You're always alone, always tired. No one would miss one more. By the time the officers were done, they had a notebook full of leads and a shaken young woman who didn't have anywhere safe to go. We can get her into a shelter tonight, the female officer said quietly. After that, it depends who picks up the case. You better hope someone does, I said. Because those guys passed exit 112, they're not going to take losing a rig lightly. They left a card with me, told me not to talk about it on social media or to other drivers until their operation ran its course. I agreed, mostly because I was too wrung out to argue. On my way back to the truck, the night felt different, thinner, like the darkness had retreated just a few yards but no further. I climbed into the cab, shut the door, and just sat there with the engine off, listening to the tick of cooling metal. After a while, I turned the CB back on. Static, the low murmur of distant drivers. Then, clear as a bell, "You did good, Eli," Sundown said. "How long you been listening?" I asked. "Long enough," he replied. "They hit that fake crew about 10 minutes ago. 3 arrests, 1 runner. They'll find him." Harper gave them just enough. "You some kind of guardian angel?" I asked. "Or you just have a death wish, sticking your nose in other people's business?" He chuckled, low and humorless. "Just a driver who didn't like what he saw one night," he said. "Same as you." Silence stretched between us. "You know they'll just move," I said. "Different stretch of road, different setup, different bait." "Yeah," he said. "But word will spread. Cops will be watching, drivers will be listening. Every time they try, the window gets smaller." I thought of Harper's hollow eyes on the side of the highway, of the bruises on her wrist, of the way she'd looked walking into that truck stop, caught between terror and the faintest glimmer of hope. "You think she's going to make it?" I asked. Sundown was quiet for a long time. "Some people don't get any exits at all," he said finally. "She got one. That's more than most." The channel crackled. Somewhere out there, another voice broke in, asking about a wreck near Wichita. Falls and Sundown faded back into the static like he'd never been there. I started the engine. The truck vibrated back to life under me. As I pulled out a Rattlesnake Ridge, I caught a glimpse of Harper through the glass, sitting in a booth, wrapped in a blanket, talking to the female officer. She looked small, but not quite as hollow as before. Back on 287, the night swallowed my headlights again. The road stretched out, long and dark and full of places where bad things could happen. I adjusted my mirrors, set my speed, and settled in. If you're ever out there late at night and you see someone standing alone on the shoulder, arm raised, eyes empty, you're going to have to make your own choice. Maybe you'll stop, maybe you'll keep going. But if somewhere in the crackle of the CB, a voice you don't recognize calls you by your real name and tells you to get off the road, do yourself a favor, listen, because out here, the monsters don't howl at the moon. They wear safety vests, carry clipboards, and stand in the glow of fake construction lights. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and a one-way disappearance is a stranger's voice on Channel 19. Story 3. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been hauling refrigerated loads for 12 years. Cold chain logistics, that's the business. Perishables, pharmaceuticals, medical samples. Everything has to stay at the right temperature, or it spoils, or worse. I'd never had a problem with it until the night I picked up a load that shouldn't have existed. It was early November, and I was running out of Flint, Michigan, heading south toward Atlanta. The warehouse where I picked up this particular job was different from the usual spots. No loading dock, no visible signage. Just a nondescript concrete building off a side road industrial area. The kind of place that doesn't want to be noticed. Dispatch had called it in as routine medical specimen transport, sealed trailer, specific temperature requirement, -15 Celsius. Paperwork was vague. Biological specimens for research purposes, that was it. No breakdown of contents, no hazmat designation, no shipper contact information beyond a P.O. box in Delaware. I should have flagged it right there, but the rate was good, better than good, and I just had my truck in the shop for brake work. Money was tight, so I pulled up to the warehouse around 9 p.m., killed the engine, and waited. 2 men came out wearing full hazmat suits, not the casual kind you see in hospitals, industrial grade, with respirators sealed at the wrists and ankles. They didn't say anything, just, at me, nodded toward the warehouse and gestured for me to back the trailer to the loading door. Inside, the warehouse was cold. I mean, genuinely frigid, like walking into a meat locker. The walls were lined with stainless steel, and the air smelled wrong, chemical sweet, like rotting fruit mixed with formaldehyde. The 2 men in suits began loading crates into my trailer. Heavy crates, maybe 3 feet by 2 feet, sealed with what looked like industrial plastic wrap and metal straps. Each one must have weighed 150 pounds, maybe more. They moved slowly, deliberately, treating each crate like it might detonate. I asked what was in them. One of the men looked at me, face invisible behind the respirator, and said, "You don't want to know." That should have been my second warning. But he was right, in a way. I'd learned years ago that the less you ask about cargo, the fewer problems you have. So I just stood there and watched them load 8 crates into the refrigerated unit, strap them down, and seal the trailer doors. The paperwork they handed me was worse than before, just a routing, Flint to Atlanta, and a phone number for delivery confirmation. No company name, no shipper ID. Nothing that would let me trace where this stuff was actually supposed to go. Temperature stays at -15, one of the men said. His voice was muffled through the respirator. You check at every stop. You don't open this trailer for any reason. You see the temperature rise above -10. You call this number immediately. He handed me a business card with nothing but a phone number printed on it. What happens if the temperature rises? I asked. The men exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. The specimens die, he said. And then nobody wants to know what you've got in the back. I'd been driving for 12 years. I'd heard a lot of vague threats and weird instructions. But something about the way he said that, the flat certainty in his voice, made my skin crawl. I signed the paperwork anyway. Looked. By 10:30 p.m., I was back on the highway, heading south, watching my temperature gauge obsessively every 5 minutes. -15. Perfect. Everything was fine, except it wasn't. About 50 miles south of Flint, somewhere around exit 85 on I-75, I started to hear something. At first, I thought it was the refrigeration unit cycling. They make a lot of noise, especially when the ambient temperature drops. But this was different. This was rhythmic, almost like thumping. I turned the radio down and listened harder. Thump, 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 from the trailer behind me. I pulled into a rest area, turned off the engine, and climbed down from the cab. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the dark sky. I walked around to the back of the trailer and pressed my ear against the metal. The thumping was louder now, more deliberate, like something or someone was deliberately hitting the inside of the wall. My heart started to race. I checked the trailer doors, sealed, padlocked from the outside, just like I'd left them. The temperature gauge on the rear panel showed -15, right where it should be. I got back in the cab and drove. For the next 100 miles, I kept hearing it. The thumping would start, run for a few minutes, then stop. Silence. Then it would start again. Sometimes it sounded like it was coming from one side of the trailer, sometimes from the other, like whatever was making the noise was moving around inside. By the time I hit Tennessee, I was sweating despite the cold. At a truck stop outside Nashville, I sat in an all-night diner and tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Stress, lack of sleep, too much coffee. The mind plays tricks when you're alone for long hours. But I knew what I'd heard. I called the number on the business card. A man answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting. "Yeah," he said. "It's the driver," I said. "The one with your load. Something's moving around in the trailer." Silence. "The specimen containers shift," he said finally. "That's normal. Just keep driving." "That didn't sound like container shifting," I said. "Just keep driving," he repeated, and hung up. I sat there in that diner booth for a long time, coffee going cold in front of me, staring at nothing. By the time I crossed into Georgia, I'd almost convinced myself it was fine. The thumping had stopped. The temperature was stable. I was just some paranoid guy hauling medical supplies that had to stay cold. Then I smelled it. The odor came through the ventilation system. Sweet, rotten, like old meat left in the sun mixed with something chemical and wrong. It filled the cab so fast I had to crack the windows despite the cold. I pulled over on the shoulder of I-75 and climbed out, gasping for fresh air. When I walked around the back of the trailer, I saw it immediately. Liquid, dark red, almost black, dripping from the bottom of the trailer door, pooling on the asphalt. The smell was coming from there, thick, sickly, like nothing I'd ever encountered. I grabbed my phone to call the number again, but before I could dial, I heard something else, a scratching sound, from inside the trailer, not thumping, scratching, like claws on metal, long, deliberate scratches, down the inside wall of the trailer. I stood there in the dark, phone in my hand, listening to that sound, and something in my head clicked into place. I'd been told the temperature stays at -15, that if it rises, nobody wants to know what you've got in the back. -15. That's cold enough to preserve things indefinitely. Cold enough to keep something alive, maybe, if it was in some kind of suspended state. I dialed the number again. "It's happening," I said when he answered. "The temperature gauge is rising. It's at -10 now, and there's fluid leaking. And I'm hearing—" "Stay calm," the man interrupted. "How much is it leaking?" "A lot," I said. "There's a pool of it under the trailer." He swore, a single sharp word. "You need to get to the next truck stop and park in the middle of the lot," he said. "Under the lights. Don't let anyone near the trailer. I'm sending someone to meet you." "What's in here?" I demanded. "What are you shipping?" "Nothing that matters if you get to the truck stop," he said. "Just drive." He hung up. I got back in the cab, hands shaking, and merged back onto the interstate. Every mile felt like it took an hour. The smell was getting worse, seeping through every vent. And the scratching, it had stopped about 10 minutes ago, which somehow felt more ominous than the noise itself. At exit 201, I turned off and found a truck stop. Bright lights, plenty of other trucks, people. I parked dead center of the lot under a lamp pole and killed the engine. A state trooper was there within 45 minutes. I'd called 911, told them I had a sealed trailer with unknown contents that was leaking and making noises. Told them I couldn't open it because of my contract, but something was seriously wrong. The trooper, a guy named Patterson, was skeptical at first, but when he smelled the odor coming from the trailer, his expression changed. "When did you pick this up?" he asked. "Flint," I said. "About 14 hours ago. You called the shipper?" "Yeah. They told me to come to a truck stop and someone would meet me." Patterson called for backup. Then he called for hazmat. By the time the hazmat team showed up, it was nearly dawn. They had scanning equipment, specialized tools, the whole 9 yards. They opened the trailer carefully, and what they found inside changed everything. The crates had broken, the plastic wrap had fractured, and inside were remains. Large animal remains decomposing, packed in ice, what looked like bears maybe, or big cats. Fresh scratches covered the inside walls of the trailer, deep gouges in the metal. And in one corner, a shipping manifest, handwritten, in a language I didn't recognize, detailed what looked like coordinates, dates, and names of places I'd never heard of. "This is a wildlife trafficking operation," one of the hazmat officers said to Patterson. "Endangered species. This is federal." Patterson looked at me. "You had no idea what you were hauling?" he asked. "None," I said. "If I had, I wouldn't have picked it up." He believed me, I think. But it didn't matter. By the end of the day, I was being interviewed by federal agents. By the end of the week, my name was in a police report and the warehouse. In Flint was being investigated for illegal wildlife trafficking. The man who'd hired me was never found. Federal agents told me later that the operation had been moving endangered species from Africa and Asia through Michigan, breaking them into parts across the U.S., and selling them to private collectors and research labs that didn't ask questions. The remains in my trailer had been from a trafficking bust in Kenya. Illegal shipment intercepted, supposed to be destroyed, but someone inside the chain had diverted it instead, a chance to make quick money by moving the specimens through the U.S. black market before they fully decomposed. How long would something in that condition have been alive? I asked one of the agents. She hesitated. If we're talking about the scraping sounds you heard, she said carefully, those scratches suggest something was moving during transport. But at -15, higher organisms enter a kind of suspended state. We think, she paused, choosing her words, we think one of the specimens may not have been fully dead when it was loaded. The scratching sounds, the liquid leaking, the thumping earlier. You mean something was moving around in there? I asked. We believe so, she said. We're still determining what exactly. The remains aren't in good enough condition for positive ID on all of them. I've been driving for another year since then. Different company, different routes. I avoid anything with sealed containers now. I report anything unusual to authorities immediately. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm rolling through empty stretches of highway, I still hear it. That scratching sound, that rhythmic thumping, and I wonder if there's another driver out there right now, hauling something they don't understand, listening to sounds from a trailer they can't open, watching a temperature gauge climb higher than it should. The weird part is what happened after. I got a call from Patterson, the state trooper, about 6 months after the incident. He said they'd made arrests in connection with the wildlife trafficking ring. 3 people in Flint, 2 in Atlanta. A whole network of people moving endangered species through the country. We got some of them, he said, but not all of them. The operation's still running, just different routes, different logistics. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I've been hearing things, he said, from other drivers, on the CB, in truck stops, stories about sealed trailers, weird noises, fluid leaks. Same pattern you described. You think they're still using drivers? I asked. After what happened, I think they learned from it, Patterson said. Next time, they'll be more careful, better paperwork, less obvious red flags. But the game's the same. Find a driver who needs money. Load them with something they can't identify, and hope they make the delivery before anything goes wrong. I thought about that conversation a lot. A few months later, I was at a truck stop outside Chattanooga when I overheard 2 drivers talking about a run they'd almost taken. Some guy had approached them in the parking lot, offered $1,000 to haul a sealed refrigerated load from Miami to Houston, no questions asked. Good money. But something had felt off, so they declined. You hear about that driver out of Flint? One of them asked the other. The one who picked up the dead animals? I think these guys are the same operation. I walked over and introduced myself, told them my story, told them to warn other drivers they knew. Word spread. It always does in the trucking community. After that, I started getting messages on CB channels, drivers asking if I heard about suspicious loads, reporting weird pickups, sharing warnings. A whole underground network of truckers watching out for each other, trying to keep the predators from finding easy prey. I don't know if it helped. I don't know if it stopped anything. But I like to think it made things a little harder for whoever's still running that operation. The truth about long-haul driving is that you spend most of your time alone. Alone with your thoughts, alone with the road, alone with whatever you're carrying in the back of your truck. Sometimes what you're carrying is just freight, electronics, produce, building materials, but sometimes it's something else entirely. Something that shouldn't be moving. Something that somebody wants hidden, something that the world isn't supposed to know about. If you're ever offered a sealed load with vague paperwork and too good to be true money, my advice is simple: turn it down. Because the scratching sounds you hear at 3 a.m. on an empty stretch of highway aren't worth any amount of cash. And the things that make those sounds, they're counting on drivers like you not asking questions. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm still out here, hauling refrigerated loads that I can account for, carrying cargo I can identify. But every time I see a sealed trailer on the road, I wonder what's inside. And every time I pass another driver I don't recognize, I wonder if they're in the middle of the same nightmare I barely survived. Stay alert out there. Because the highway has a lot of secrets, and not all of them should ever see the light of day. Story 4. My name is Nolan Price, and for most of my life the only constant things have been diesel, asphalt, and the white lines drifting past under my headlights. I've driven coast to coast, border to border, in every kind of weather. People think the worst thing out here is falling asleep at the wheel or hitting a deer. They don't understand that sometimes the real danger is standing there waiting for you, smiling, in a pool of gas station light. This happened 3 years ago when I was running nights out of Sacramento, hauling auto parts east along Highway 50 toward Utah. They call part of that road the loneliest road in America, and they aren't kidding. There are stretches where you can drive 45 minutes and not see another pair of headlights. Beautiful in the daytime, predatory at night. I'd left Sacramento late because the loading crew was behind. By the time I'd cleared the city sprawl, it was close to midnight. The sky out there is wide open, but that night there was cloud cover. No moon, no stars, just black. My cab felt like a little floating room in the middle of nowhere. Dashboard, glow, and the hum of the engine the only signs that the world still existed. About 2 hours in, somewhere after Fallon, and before the real emptiness starts, I realized I needed fuel. My gauge was low enough to make me nervous. I checked my GPS and saw a small station marked about 20 miles ahead, Silver Basin Travel Stop. I'd never heard of it, never stopped there in 15 years of running similar routes. Weird, but new places pop up all the time. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, a lit sign emerged from the dark Silver Basin, Fuel Food Showers. It looked old though, not new. The big neon letters were half dead, the S in silver blinking in a tired, uneven way. I pulled off the highway onto a short access road and rolled into the lot. The first thing that struck me was how still it was. No wind, no bugs buzzing around the lights, no other trucks. Just my rig, the pumps, and the low buzzing hum of the canopy lights. The second thing was the smell. Fuel stops always have that background scent. Diesel, oil, hot rubber. This place smelled stale, like a building that's been closed for a long time, suddenly switched back on. I parked at the far diesel island and killed the engine. The silence folded in on me, thick and immediate. When I stepped down from the cab, the air felt heavier than it should have, like a storm was about to break, even though the sky showed nothing. The pumps were the old analog kind, with rolling numbers instead of digital displays. The nozzles were worn, handles scarred from decades of use. A hand-lettered sign was taped to the nearest pump, pay inside first, no exceptions. I frowned. Out here, that's not unheard of, but the handwriting looked faded, as if it had been hanging there for years without once being taken down. The convenience store was a squat, rectangular building with floor-to-ceiling windows along the front. The glass was too reflective. I could see my own tired face in it more clearly than the interior. As I approached, the automatic doors slid open with a dry hiss, like they hadn't been used in ages. Inside, the light was harsh and yellow, buzzing from tired fluorescent tubes. The aisles were neat, but wrong. The products on the shelves looked like they'd been teleported out of a different decade. Glass soda bottles with labels I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Candy bars in old packaging. Price stickers that made no sense. 50 cents, 75 cents, $1 for a sandwich. Behind the counter stood a man in a faded trucker cap and a button-up shirt with a stitched name patch that said Carl. He looked to be in his 50s, but there was a stiffness to him, like someone had posed him there. His eyes tracked me, but his smile arrived a beat too late. "Evening," he said. His voice was gravelly, like he hadn't used it in years. "You're running late." The hair on the back of my neck lifted. "How'd you know that?" I asked. He shrugged. "This time of night, only folks who stop here are running behind." He nodded toward the windows. "Quiet out there, huh?" "Quiet enough," I said, trying to sound casual. "Need to fill up on diesel. Your sign says pay first." "That's right," he said. "You can leave a card. I'll start the pump." I pulled out my company fuel card and slid it across the counter. He picked it up and turned it over, squinting at it like he wasn't really reading so much as pretending to. "You out of Sacramento?" he asked. "Yeah, headed east." He nodded, slow. "A lot of drivers used to run that way," he said. "Not as many these days." He swiped the card on an old terminal that beeped weakly and lit up with a dull green screen. No logo, no modern interface, just blocky numbers. It looked like something out of 1998. Still, it accepted the card. "Pump 3's live," he said. "You got about 10 minutes before they roll in. Might want to fuel quick." I blinked. "Before who rolls in?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. You hear him yet?" he asked. "On the radio?" Something cold slid into my stomach. I hadn't had the CB on since Reno. Too much nonsense chatter, too many ghost stories. Without breaking eye contact with him, I reached up and thumbed the small handheld on my belt. The speaker crackled to life, filling the silence of the store with a wash of static. Beneath the static, like someone whispering under a blanket, a voice was talking. "Anyone. Eastbound on 50, we got a breakdown a few miles past Silver Basin. Need a hand, just a quick look. Can't get through on my phone." It was a woman. Young, frightened. Her words tumbled over each other, thick with just the right amount of panic. I'd heard that tone before. Different highway, different state, same performance. I turned the volume down until her voice was just a murmur. "Yeah," Carl said softly, "that's them." "Scammers?" I asked. My throat felt tight. "Worse," he said. "They've been working this stretch for a while. Whole crew. 2 cars, sometimes 3. One bait, one chase, one block. They wait until you're past the last light for 40 miles. Then they make you stop." "How?" I asked. "You just don't pull over." "They don't need you to," he said. "They'll run you, edge up behind you, blind your mirrors, get in front, and slow you down in the middle of nowhere. Throw a flare, pretend to be road crew. All looks real, till the guns come out." I studied his face, trying to decide if he was another storyteller chasing a reaction from a tired driver. "You seen them do it?" I asked. He held my gaze a long moment. "I've seen the aftermath," he said. "State boys come through asking questions. Wreckers bringing in rigs that never should have been off the road. Left some paint on the guardrails out past marker 114. Lot of red on the asphalt, too." The woman's voice crackled again on my belt, cutting through the static. "Please, if anyone can hear me, I've got my little brother with me. We're stuck out here." My hand tightened around the radio. "Highway Patrol know about this?" I asked. "Know enough," he said. "Hard to catch 'em in the act, though. The folks that disappear out there don't call it in afterward. And the ones that survive don't always want to report what they had to do to survive." He slid my card back across the counter, then almost as an afterthought, added, "Pump 3. Top off. Don't linger." I stepped back out into the night. The smell of stale fuel hit me again. For a moment, I just stood there, listening. In the distance, beyond the halo of station lights, the highway whispered, a faint ribbon of motion. Overhead, the clouds hadn't moved. I fueled fast, eyes constantly on the access road. No headlights, no engines, just stillness. When I finished, I secured the cap and climbed back into the cab. My GPS showed the same route, the same thin blue line stretching across emptiness. But now, just past the little icon marking Silver Basin, I saw something else, a small construction symbol. "Road work, expect delays." I hadn't seen that earlier. The CB on my belt hissed softly. "Just past the gas station. Dark blue sedan on the shoulder. Please, I don't want to be out here alone." I put the truck in gear and rolled slowly toward the exit. At the edge of the lot, I stopped. Something in my gut was screaming at me that this was a fork in the road, the kind you don't come back from. One way, I kept driving like nothing was wrong. The other way, I tried to do something about it. I reached for my phone and dialed Nevada Highway Patrol. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. "This is driver Nolan Price," I said. "I'm at a place called Silver Basin Travel Stop off Highway 50. I'm hearing a distress call on Channel 19 about a breakdown a few miles east. I think it's a setup." The dispatcher was quiet for a moment. "Sir, did you say Silver Basin?" she asked. "Yeah. Can you confirm your exact location?" she said, her tone changing. I looked at my GPS again. The little marker showed my truck parked exactly where the station was. I read off the coordinates. On the other end, the dispatcher exhaled sharply. "Sir, there's no active travel stop at that location," she said. "Silver Basin closed 6 years ago after an armed robbery. The building burned down in 2019. Are you sure that's where you are?" I stared out the windshield at the glowing canopy, the lit storefront, the old pumps under buzzing lights. "I'm looking right at it," I said. The dispatcher lowered her voice. "Okay," she said. "Stay put a moment, and keep that CB on. Tell me exactly what you're hearing." The woman's voice broke in again. weak with theatrical desperation. "Any truckers close by, please, just stop for a second. I think someone's following us." Behind the panic, I caught it, a faint overlap, a tiny repeat. The same 3 words played twice in quick succession under the main audio. "A loop. It's a recording," I said. "She's looping." "We've had multiple reports of that call the last 12 months, the dispatcher said. "Every time we send units out, we find nothing. No broken down car, no signs of a struggle, just tire marks and sometimes blood." I swallowed. "So what do you want me to do?" I asked. She hesitated. "Fuel up, get back on the road," she said. "But when you pass mile marker 114, do not slow down. Do not stop for flares, cones, or anyone waving you over unless it's a clearly marked unit. We've had fake work zones set up out there before. We're rolling a car toward your area now, but they're 40 minutes out." "Got it," I said. "And sir," she added, "once you're clear of that stretch, I'd appreciate another call. I want to confirm you made it through." That was the first time in my life a dispatcher had sounded personally invested in whether I made it to my next mile marker. I thanked Carl on the way out. He didn't say much, just tipped his cap and watched me go with that same stiff posture. Back on the highway, the world shrank down to cone of light again. My mirrors were empty. My trailer hummed behind me, steady and solid. The GPS counted down the miles to marker 114. The closer I got, the more the CB hissed and popped, like the air itself was resisting. "Anyone, please." Just one truck. The voice grew louder the nearer I drew to 114, rising above the static, more frantic, more desperate. She described a car behind her. Headlights glaring, someone trying to run her off the road. Then, as my odometer ticked over, I saw the glow. Up ahead, the blackness softened into an orange smear. As I rounded a gentle curve, it resolved into something clearer, flashing. Amber lights, traffic cones, reflective vests moving slowly. A work zone. There were 2 pickups parked on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. A portable arrow board pointed me into the left lane. 3 men in high visibility gear stood near the middle of the road. One was waving a flashlight, signaling me to slow down. For a moment, instinct warred with memory. The setup was textbook. It looked right, but so had a lot of things that turned out wrong. I kept my hands steady on the wheel and eased slightly left, enough to give them room without committing to a stop. One of the men stepped closer, raising his other hand, palm out. "Hey, big guy," he shouted, voice faint through my closed window. "Got a closure up ahead. Need you to hold up a second." I shook my head and pointed forward, mouthing, "Call dispatch," and tapped my headset. He frowned, stepped right up to the white line, and for half a second, his vest shifted just enough for me to see what was underneath. No dot insignia, no company logo, just a dark hoodie, and at his hip, the outline of something too straight, too rigid to be a tool. My foot pressed down on the accelerator. The truck responded with a low roar. The men realized what I was doing, and one of them shouted something I couldn't make out. One of the pickups lurched forward from the shoulder, trying to nose into my lane. I didn't move. 40 tons of loaded truck beats a half-ton pickup every time. The driver must have realized it too, because he slammed on his brakes at the last second. I flashed past, my right mirror missing his front bumper by inches. In my side mirror, I saw one of the men hurl something after me, a flare maybe, or just a curse. The work zone blurred away into darkness. The woman's voice on the CB stuttered, glitched, then cut out mid-sentence. Silence flooded the cab. I drove 12 more miles before I realized I'd been holding my breath. When I finally pulled over at a crowded, well-lit truck plaza an hour later, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial. The dispatcher picked up on the first ring. "You through 114? She asked. "Yeah," I said. "Your fake work crew's still out there." "We know," she said grimly. "We just got a call from another driver behind you who saw them pulling their cones off the road. Units are in pursuit, but these guys are slippery." "Your database," I said, staring out at the dozens of trucks in the plaza lot, their running lights like grounded stars. "Got anything on a Silver Basin travel stop?" She paused, Like I said before, she said, that building doesn't exist anymore. It burned down. 3 fatalities. Robbery gone bad. We have photos from the investigation. I told her what I'd seen. The lit canopy, the stocked shelves, the man named Carl behind the counter, worn but solid. She didn't say I was crazy. She didn't say I was lying. She just said, send that fuel receipt to the fax number I'm about to give you. If there's anything on it at all, we'll figure out what. We hung up. I went into the Plaza Diner, ordered coffee I didn't need, and sat there for a long time. Long enough for my nerves to settle. Long enough to almost convince myself that Silver Basin had just been another nowhere gas station I'd somehow never noticed. When I checked my company fuel log the next day, there was an entry, timestamp, amount of diesel, route, but the merchant field was blank, just a string of zeros where the station's ID should have been. I never got a call back from that dispatcher. These days, when I roll through that part of Highway 50, I make damn. Sure, I have enough fuel to get past that stretch without stopping. My GPS still shows a little icon where Silver Basin ought to be, but the last time I checked, in broad daylight, all I saw was a scorched concrete slab and a rusted sign frame. No pumps, no lights, no Carl. The highway changes people. It erases some too. There are places where the line between still here and gone gets thin enough that things bleed through. Bad decisions, old crimes, unfinished business. Maybe Silver Basin is just another story drivers tell each other to stay awake at 3 a.m. But if you ever find yourself out there at night, fuel light blinking, and your GPS offers you a travel stop you've never heard of, and the prices are too low, and the shelves look too old, top off if you have to. Ask too many questions. Listen to your radio like your life depends on it. Because sometimes the highway gives you one last safe place to stop before it turns you into a story somebody else tells. And sometimes, if you're lucky, there's still a man named Carl standing under, buzzing lights, waiting to warn you about what's waiting in the dark. Story 5. My name is Logan Hart, and if there's one thing long-haul trucking has taught me, it's that danger doesn't always come from the road in front of you. Sometimes it's waiting where you park. This happened when I was running nights up the East Coast, hauling furniture from Jacksonville to New York. I'd taken 95 more times than I could count, but this particular trip fell on a tight schedule. Dispatch wanted the load in Newark by 9 a.m., and thanks to a late pickup, I was already behind. By the time I hit South Carolina, it was after midnight. My eyes burned, my shoulders ached, and that familiar fog was creeping in at the edges of my vision. I knew I needed to stop just for an hour or two, grab a nap and a coffee. The problem was, every truck stop I passed was packed, rows of rigs, jammed in nose-to-tail, drivers already shut down for the night. Somewhere north of Florence, my GPS showed a rest area at exit 23. Rest area, 2 miles, the overhead sign confirmed. No services, just parking and bathrooms. Empty enough, I hoped, to find a space and shut my eyes before I started drifting across lanes. The ramp curved off into the dark, and the trees closed in. The rest area itself was small. 1 loop of asphalt, a handful of picnic tables, a cinder block, restroom building in the center, and a dozen parking spots for trucks along the far edge. Only 1 other rig was there, parked down at the end, all its lights off. I pulled into a spot closer to the middle, under a light pole that buzzed faintly. The sodium lamp overhead flickered once, then steadied, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The other truck sat in shadow, a long dark shape with no markings I could make out from here. I set the brakes, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment in the sudden silence. My ears rang with the absence of noise. The air outside was cool and damp. A faint fog hung low over the grass, clinging to the pavement in thin patches. I told myself I'd just hit the restroom, come back, set an alarm for 90 minutes and sleep. When I opened the door and climbed down, the quiet hit me harder than the cold. No cars pulling in or out, no distant hum of the highway, just the ticking of my engine cooling and the soft buzz of the light. I crossed the lot toward the restroom building. Its windows were dark. Inside, the fluorescent lights flicked on automatically when I pushed the door open, buzzing to life above cracked tiles and tired-looking sinks. There was graffiti on the stalls, the usual mix of crude jokes and old phone numbers. While I was washing my hands, I heard it, a faint tap, then another, like something brushing against metal. I froze, listening. Tap, tap, scrape. It was distant, muffled, like it was coming from outside. I shut off the water and held my breath. Nothing for a few seconds. Then a dull thud, low and heavy. For no good reason, the hairs on my arms stood up. Probably just the other driver moving around, I muttered to myself. On my way out, I took a longer route back to my truck, cutting across the center of the loop so I could get a better look at the other rig. It was an older Freightliner with a faded white cab and a dark, unmarked trailer. No company logo, no dot number visible on the side, at least not from where I was. As I got closer, I realized something else. The trailer doors were chained from the outside. Now that by itself isn't unheard of. Plenty of guys add chains and padlocks for security, but this wasn't just a simple chain through the handles. There were 3 separate chains crisscrossed over the doors, each secured with a heavy lock and what looked like duct tape around the edges of the door frame. Like someone had tried to seal it shut. The cab was dark, no glow from the sleeper, no sign of movement. I slowed down, trying not to look like I was staring. Tap. The sound came again, this time clearly from that trailer. Not loud, just deliberate, like someone tapping a knuckle, testing. I stopped. There are moments in life where your brain splits in two. One half says, don't get involved, this isn't your problem. The other half whispers, if there's someone in there, and you walk away. I stepped closer. Hello? I called quietly. Anyone in there? For a moment, nothing. Then, from inside the trailer, very softly, 3 taps in quick succession. Tap, tap, tap. My throat went dry. I looked around the rest area. No other vehicles, no movement in the trees. The fog seemed a little thicker now, pooling around the light poles. I pulled my phone out, checked a signal. 1 bar. Maybe enough for a call, maybe not. My thumb hovered over 911. Then I heard a new sound. Footsteps behind me. I spun around. A man was walking toward me from the direction of the trees, hands in the pockets of a dark hoodie. Late 30s maybe, clean-shaven, ball cap pulled low. He moved with an easy, unhurried gait, like this was his backyard and I was the one trespassing. Evening, he said, like we were just 2 guys passing each other in a grocery store. I nodded. Evening, everything all right? He asked, glancing past me at the chained trailer doors. You lost or something? I thought I heard something, I said carefully. From the trailer, he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Rigs make all kinds of noise when they cool down, he said. Metal expands, contracts, weird acoustics in these little lots. Your own truck can sound like it's coming from somewhere else, maybe. But I'd been around enough trailers to know the difference between a thermal pop and a knuckle wrap. Your truck? I asked, nodding toward the Freightliner. Yeah, he said easily. Hauling a sensitive load. That's why all the extra security. Boss is paranoid. He stopped about 10 feet away, where the light from the pole cut off into shadow. You out of Jacksonville? He asked. Saw you come in from that direction. Yeah, I said slowly. You? Savannah, he said. Run this route all the time. Exit 23's my usual stop. Quiet. Nobody to bother you. Something about the way he said that last part put my nerves on edge. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets, like he was cold. You got a CO driver? He asked. Nope. Shame, he said. Dangerous out here alone. You got folks who know where you are? You check in regular? The questions were casual enough on the surface, but they were the wrong questions. The kind you ask when you're trying to measure how much fallout there'll be if someone doesn't make it to their destination. I run electronic logs, I said. Company tracks my truck, cameras and all. That was only half true, but he didn't need to know that. He tilted his head, studying my face. His eyes were flat and pale, the color of dishwater. Smart, he said. World's not as friendly as it used to be. Behind us, from inside the trailer, there was another sound. Not a tap this time. A thump, followed by what could only be described as a muffled cry. It was faint, like someone with tape over their mouth trying to yell through metal and insulation. But it was there. Both of us froze. For a split second, something flickered in his expression. Annoyance. Then it was gone, smoothed over. "You hear that?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Like I said, rigs make noise. Could be air settling. Could be..." Another thump, louder. Then a scraping sound, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor inside. "I'm calling the police," I said. His jaw tensed. "No need for that," he said. "Look, man, just go get some sleep. You're clearly tired. I got this handled." "Do you?" I asked. "Because it sounds like somebody's in there." He took one step closer, into the light. I saw something bulge inside his hoodie pocket. Phone, wallet, or something more dangerous. His tone dropped a notch. "Walk away," he said. "Whatever you think is happening here, it's not your business." Every instinct I had screamed that this was the moment. I could back down, pretend I bought his story, climb into my truck, and hope he decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Or I could push and maybe never leave this rest area. My fingers tightened around my phone. Before I could decide, the situation chose for me. Headlights swept into the rest area from the entrance ramp. Bright white beams cut through the fog, raking across the lot. A second later, red and blue lights flickered on. A patrol car. The man in the hoodie turned his head, eyes narrowing. For a second, he looked like someone whose carefully arranged plans had just been knocked off the table. "Great," he muttered under his breath. The cruiser rolled slowly around the loop, tires crunching on gravel. The driver's door opened, and a state trooper climbed out, adjusting his duty belt. Late 40s, graying hair, the kind of guy who looked like he'd seen too much and didn't want to see anymore. "Evening, folks," he called. "Everything all right out here?" I opened my mouth. The man in the hoodie beat me to it. "Just stretching our legs, officer," he said smoothly. "Long night. Thought we heard a critter in the woods, that's all." The trooper's gaze swept from him to me, then to the chained trailer doors. "You the driver of that rig?" he asked the hoodie. "Yes, sir," the man said. "Hauling sealed freight. Security protocols, you know how it is." The trooper's eyes lingered on the multiple chains, the tape. "Got your bill of lading on you?" he asked. "Sure do," the man said. "In the cab. Want me to grab it? If you don't mind." Hoodie man hesitated for the briefest of moments. Then he forced a smile. "Be right back." He walked around the front of the truck toward the cab. The trooper watched him go, hand resting lightly on his holster. "Everything really all right?" he asked me quietly. "There's someone in that trailer," I said, keeping my voice low. I heard them, more than once. That guy tried to talk me out of calling anyone. The trooper's jaw tightened. "You hear a voice?" he asked. "Words?" "No," I said, "just muffled, like someone's trying..." The trooper nodded once, like he'd already suspected as much. "Stay right here," he said, "and if he comes back this way, you get behind your truck and stay there." He moved toward the trailer, one hand unhooking his flashlight from his belt, the other still hovering near his gun. He pressed his ear to the metal for a moment. I held my breath. We both heard it then, 3 sharp bangs from inside, followed by a sound that turned my stomach, the unmistakable noise of someone kicking, heels slamming again and again into a floor. The trooper stepped back. "State police," he shouted at the trailer doors. "If you can hear me, knock 3 times. 3 knocks answered him, frantic and fast. He spun around. "Driver!" He barked toward the cab, but the man in the hoodie was already moving, not toward the cab, toward the trees. He'd used the far side of the truck as cover and was sprinting now, cutting, away from the lit lot into the shadows at the edge of the woods. "Stop!" the trooper shouted. "Police, stop right there!" No chance. The trooper yanked his radio from his shoulder, gasping out our location. Description: possible kidnapping, suspect fleeing on foot. Then he turned back to me. "Get in your truck," he snapped. "Lock the doors. Don't get out for anybody but a uniform. What about whoever's in there?" I asked. He looked at the chains, the locks, the tape. His jaw clenched. "They're getting out," he said. "Tonight." The next 30 minutes were a blur. More units arrived. 2 more cruisers, then an SUV with plainclothes officers. They cordoned off the rest area, set up flares, questioned me, ran my license, checked my logs, all while bolt cutters snapped through the chains on the trailer. When they finally got the doors open and swung them wide, the smell that poured out was horrible, a mix of sweat, fear, and something metallic. They pulled out 3 people. 2 men, 1 woman, all in their 20s, all handcuffed with zip ties, tape marks raw around their mouths. Terrified, dehydrated, but alive. They'd been taken from different truck stops over the last 2 days. One from Georgia, one from North Carolina, one from a rest area not far from where we were. They were told they were being moved, sold, traded, whatever word you want to use for treating humans like cargo. The trailer had a false floor at the front, a space where someone else could have been. It was empty, thank God, but there were straps bolted to the walls. A bucket, a stack of cheap blankets. It wasn't his first time. They never found him that night. Dogs tracked his scent to the tree line and then lost it near the sound of the highway. One of the cops figured he'd doubled back through the woods and flagged down a car, maybe had an accomplice waiting. Men like that don't usually work alone. I gave my statement 3 times, to the troopers, to some federal agents who arrived near dawn, to a detective from a human trafficking task force. Each time the same questions. How did you know something was wrong? I heard the noise. Why didn't you just mind your own business and go to sleep? I don't know, I said, but that wasn't true. I did know, because for all the tough talk about not my problem, every driver out here knows what it feels like to be alone and vulnerable in the dark. Because if it had been me in that trailer, I'd have wanted somebody to care enough to listen through the walls. They kept the rest area closed for 2 days. When I passed by a week later, the ramp to exit 23 was coned off, a no public access sign bolted to a temporary barrier. The rest area never reopened. Officially, they said it was due to maintenance concerns. Unofficially, the story that started spreading through trucker channels was different. Now, whenever someone mentions I-95 and late-night stops, I tell them to skip exit 23. Not because of ghosts or curses or anything supernatural, but because sometimes places soak up what's done in them. And even if they empty out the trailer, even if they haul away the chains and padlocks, the memory of what almost happened there doesn't just go away. I still drive nights, still pull into rest areas when there's nowhere else to go, but I listen more carefully now. I pay attention to the rigs with no markings, to the ones parked always at the far end of the lot. And when I hear a thump in the dark, one that doesn't sound like settling metal or a cooling engine, I don't just write it off. If you're out there running graveyard shifts, you'll see a lot of things you can shrug off as not my business. That's your call. But if you ever park beside a chained trailer at some forgotten exit and you hear 3 quiet taps, answer you back from the inside. Remember this, not all cargo wants to stay where it's been loaded. And sometimes the only difference between a body recovered and a person rescued is whether a tired driver in the next parking spot decides to listen.